Type coercion in JavaScript is the process of converting one JavaScript type to another. Since JavaScript is weakly typed, this is possible. Now, the best way to see this happening is with some examples. So let me open up the console and we'll do a few examples there. Now let's say that we have received some numbers through an input field. And so when they come in as a string. So for example, num1 is going to be equal to 10, but it's a string. And then we'll do num2 equal to 15 as a string. So that's how they would come in. Now we could obviously convert them to a number using this technique. And then say we wanted to multiply them together, we would convert them both like this using the built-in number object. And that would give us the correct results. And this is considered explicit coercion. So we explicitly coerced or converted the number or the string to a number. However, JavaScript will do that for us. And many times we don't have to do explicit coercion. JavaScript will take care of that for us. So for example, I could do num1 times num2. And we'd get the same results, because the JavaScript engine automatically converts these to a number because of the operator that is being used to act on that data. Even though they're a string to begin with, it realizes it needs a number, and so it does that conversion for us. So this is implicit coercion. Explicit coercion, implicit coercion. And it's in this type of situation that I would use implicit coercion. Now let's look at a few other examples. For example, what if I did 1 plus true? Notice how the results of this return 2. So implicit coercion takes that Boolean, converts it to a 1. A false would be converted to a 0. Converts it to a 1 and then adds the 2 together. Now I could use the function to convert it, but I don't need to in this case. So here's another one. Let's set num3 equal to 54. We're going to go a different direction on this one. Now if we had an if statement, if num3, and that's all we have in it, so what is that doing? We'll just do a console log statement here. It has a value. It's basically what we're testing in a case like this. And what do we get? It has a value. So num3 with a 54 is considered true. Now we can do an explicit coercion on that as well. So we could do Boolean and then num3, and that comes back true. So in order for the conversion to a Boolean value, in order for that conversion to happen, that coercion, which we call it in JavaScript, values in JavaScript have a truthy value and a falsy value. And we're going to talk about that in the next topic in a lot more detail, but that's what's going on here. This number 54 is considered to be true, and so it gets converted to a true. All right, now let me jump to Visual Studio Code. I want to put some examples in there so you'll have a reference to refer to later on. Now there are three types of coercion we want to talk about: string coercion, Boolean coercion, and numeric coercion. So first, looking at string. Now, if we wanted to do an explicit coercion, we would use the string function. That's available because of the default string object. And then we can pass into it this number, and that will convert it to a string. So the results would be a string of 1, 2, 3. So that would be explicit. So let me put that out here. Now, we can also do implicit, and that's what I will usually do. If I need to convert a number to a string, it's a simple matter of using the concatenation operator and concatenating with an empty string. And this is implicit. Better put a comment there. And that will create a string as well. Now let's look at an example for this. And this is actually one I did very recently in some work I was doing for someone. I had an array of text strings and I needed to add a number to the front of those text strings. And so that would be a case where you would use the implicit coercion to make that happen. So let me just set up a really simple example here. If we have an array and then inside of this array we have several strings, I'm just going to call these objectives. That's what this array of strings is. So another objective and one more objective, like that. And then we wanted to add a number to the front, which objective it is. This is considered the first one, second one, third one. So basically it's 1 plus the index in the array. So in the array, this is index 0, index 1, index 2, so we just add 1 to that. So let's look at how we do that. I'm going to do it with a simple for loop here. Let I equals 0, I less than the array length, and I plus plus. So we use the increment operator to increment I. Now let's just log to the console what those results are. So first thing I want to do is add 1 to I. So I'm going to put that inside of parentheses just to make sure that happens first. We've added 1 to I, and now we want to concatenate that onto the front of these objectives. And I'm going to put an underscore between that and the text. So just something like this. That's going to resolve that for us. So let me just move this over this way a bit so we can see the browser, and then I will save that. And we can see that we get those at the front. Now, you may be wondering what happened with these. Well, these function just fine, but remember, this is just an expression. So we're doing the coercion, we're not assigning it to anything, we're not displaying it, we're not doing anything else with it. The coercion is happening, and that is all. So it doesn't show up on the console here. All right, so that's string coercion. Let's take a look at Boolean coercion now. Now, as I mentioned, most values will convert to true or false, and we can use that as a shortcut. And we'll get into the truthy and falsy in the next topic in more detail. But I do want to show that we can do this type of explicit coercion. There's a number, and we're going to coerce it to a Boolean. So this is explicit. Here's another example of explicit. In this case, an object. So we could do an object and coerce that to a value, and that would be true. Now, to show implicit, I need to do an example here. So let me label this implicit. We're going to say let val, and then I'm not going to assign a value to it. And then we can have an if statement here. If not val, so that's going to implicitly convert this to a Boolean. So this is going to be undefined. It's going to implicitly convert it to a Boolean, which will be false. And then this will reverse that. So if it's not true, then we're going to add a value to it, like this. And then we'll just console log that value. So let's see what we get there. If I save that, now we get the 10. So that was implicit coercion. And that's what we use a lot when we talk about truthy and falsy, which we'll jump into in the next topic. Now finally, numeric coercion. We have explicit numeric coercion using number, as we looked at before. So this is explicit. And then we have implicit. Now one thing I like to do is use the unary operator, which is basically using the plus symbol on the front of a string to immediately convert that to a number. Instead of typing all this, if I have a string that I want to be a number and I want to immediately convert it to a number, I do it like this. And that converts it to a number. So in this case, this isn't acting as a concatenation operator, which is what we had up here, which converted to a string. Because of how this is positioned, this is converting it to a number. Now this would be implicit. But I will many times use this in place of explicit. Now I'm going to save that. Let me just show you down here what that does, since that may be new to some of you. So if I do plus 1, 2, 3, notice it returns a number. So it immediately converts that to a number. Now, another example of implicit coercion with numbers would be something like this. Let's say I wanted to check to see if 5 is less than the string 10. That's going to do an implicit coercion. Or, as we've seen previously, 5 and then some other operator multiplying it by a string. That will do implicit coercion. Let me show you that first one right here on the console. That does the implicit coercion and returns true. 5 is less than 10. Now, as far as examples for numeric conversion, we did one earlier on the console where we assumed that we were receiving numbers through a field and they came in as strings, and then we simply wanted to multiply those together. So that's an example of numeric coercion. So that is coercion, something to be aware of in JavaScript. Many times we can take advantage of implicit coercion and it can be helpful to us, but we also need to be aware of it because what we think might happen in certain situations may not happen. And so it could cause a problem with our code. All right, so let's move on and talk about truthy and falsy now.